now I'm joined by Dean Baxendale. Dean, I believe you are the one who is who broke the Operation Dragon Law that we were talking about with Phil Gursky, the one where U.S. has been allegedly, it's reported that U.S. was allegedly involved in spying on Chinese activities in Canada. How do you see then that reports of American surveillance, Americans helping Canadians spy upon Indian officials in Canada in this whole case that Justin Trudeau has accused India of?
Well, thank you for first of all for having me on today to discuss this rather important and obviously internationally sensitive subject. So a couple things. One, you mentioned Michelle Junot-Katsuya, who was the director of CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Asia Pacific, during the 80s and 90s. And he is the author of what was called the report Sidewinder, which documented the unholy trinity, which we bring out in Operation Dragonlord. And that is to suggest that there is a linkage between elite Canadian business, the political establishment, the Chinese triads or transnational organized crime, as we now call them, and direct arms of the People's Liberation Army and the Chinese Communist Party. The infiltration operations inside Canada and other nations around the world, including your own India, has been extensively documented and brought forward to people. Dragonlord suggested that with the cooperation of CSIS, there was an alarm bells that set off in Washington at the time about these linkages that they were seeing in Canada, Australia, and even in the United States. So the fact that the Americans are looking at all different countries should be a surprise to no one. And as India does the same, as do other spy operations. What is important, though, to recognize is the fact that while all of these kinds of operations, including the Khalistani separatist movement inside Canada, were happening, Canada seemed, because of our interest in engaging diasporic communities for votes and potentially to leverage that for our own political gains. When I say ours, political parties, I think a blind eye was turned to these elements. And again, I think Mr. Gursky made it very, very clear that the Khalistani separatists terrorists that may exist in Canada who were seeking an independent state in Punjab is a very small minority. The Sikh community, quite frankly, in Canada is a very peaceful group in Canada, loves Canada and loves their history. But over years, these kinds of issues have been exacerbated in the community and have found a haven. And psychologically, it's very easy to talk about a special kingdom back in India when you're so far away. The stark reality is that movement has moved on in India. The integration politically and providing voices for Sikhs within various provincial and federal the parliamentary structure within India suggests that we're looking towards peace and peaceful resolution as opposed to more radical elements that are funded inside Canada and may well be in fact funded in part by ISI and proxies of the Chinese Communist Party and other malign groups which are aligned with organized crime.
Okay. Let me take this across to Sardar Jojit Sabharwal. Jojit, the fact that we keep talking about how in India, the Khalistan movement, the so-called cause has moved on. We don't have any takers of this movement in Punjab or in India anywhere. But in Canada, it has sustained. Does it also have to do with the fact that, healing after 1984 has not happened for those who shifted to Canada? Because several times the reason that is cited is the fact that those wounds have not healed. There has not been enough apology. There has not been, enough healing on the wounds of the 1984 operation and the aftermath of it. Do you think Canadian Sikhs have not been able to move on from there, while here in India, people like you, your family and friends, have been able to move on much easy in a much easier way, in a much smoother way?
See, first of all, we should talk about 1984. 1984 was not about the government of India. It was about the then Prime Minister, the then Congress party that was leading India as the ruling party. So, see, uh, let's be honest. So, there are 30 million Sikhs in India, but they don't demand Khalistan. A meager amount of 0.8 million Sikhs in Canada, and it is being, it is being said that they are demanding Khalistan. So first of all, we need to differentiate. Sikhs are not Khalistanis. Khalistanis are not Sikhs. Khalistan for some Sikhs is a money minting business. For some, it is a political tool to destabilize India. You were talking about the CSIS, perhaps, the Canadian Intelligence Service. I must tell you that Hardeep Singh Nijjar's son, he has made a statement that the Canadian intelligence was, guiding Nijjar, and he was also advised to stay at home, which is a very serious remark by Nijjar's son. When some Khalistanis talk about their independent homeland, whole of India, whole of Bharat is our homeland. We sacrifice our lives for this country, our ancestors, our gurus. We have our takhts here. You talk about Hajur Sahib, that is one of our takht. You talk about Patna Sahib, that is one of our takht. Bharat is our homeland. There is no homeland that the Sikhs want independently. Bharat is our homeland. And Khalistan is actually a Disneyland sort of fantasy that many Khalistanis are propagating. And the major problem here is the Canadian government. They label Khalistani terrorists and Khalistani extremists as Sikh activists. That is the main problem here. By labeling them as Sikh activists, so it gives a message that they are generalizing Sikhs with the Khalistan, and that Sikhs associate themselves with the Khalistan, which is not true. So in a way or the other, a perception is being created that Sikhs desire Khalistan, which is not true at all. It is a false propaganda. Sikhs stand in
But
solidarity with
Jojit,
Bharat.
we've been talking
If there is
about
one
how
country
small
on
this
earth,
minority of Khalistan sympathizers are in Canada. Uh, the larger majority in Canada, which means doesn't support this idea, doesn't support this movement. Why do we not hear those voices? We are only hearing voices of the likes of Nijjar and Pannoon. We don't have Sikhs from Canada coming out and saying that, listen, we don't support this movement and we are against this movement. We don't want anything separate from India.
this is because the Khalistani elements, they get political support, political backup. Apart from that, they get financial support from countries like Pakistan, from countries like Canada. Now we can openly see that. And your question was why the Sikhs that refute the idea of Khalistan, why their voices are not being heard? Because their voices are suppressed. People, specifically Sikhs, Punjabis and Sikhs, they are into their business. They are into their professions, they are into their jobs. They are doing everything possible that they can do for the development of their country, for the growth of their country. But somewhere they are afraid of these Khalistani elements because they are running up whole sort of mega project to label Sikhs as Khalistanis, so that every Sikh undergoes humiliation, and then they sort of dissatisfied, and when they have no other option, they have to join the movement of this so-called Khalistan. So it is a whole conspiracy
Okay.
that is going on, and
Okay.
Sikhs
Let
are a
me.
victim of Khalistan. Sikhs do
Okay.
not want Khalistan at all.
Okay. Let me go across to Ambassador Trigunayat. Ambassador, we had first the Prime Minister of Canada hurling these wild allegations against India. Now we have their Defense Minister saying that India is an important partner and that India plays a crucial role when it comes to the partnership with Canada in the Indo-Pacific region, in furthering the vision of the Indo-Pacific region. How does that work? On one hand, you hurl allegations. On the other, you say you're an important partner. Do you see Canada sort of doubling down after making the kind of allegations that it has?
Well, Shreya, I think that probably the Canadian political leadership is not clear in what they want, and they don't realize what they have gotten into. As far as India is concerned, we have had very clear ideas for the last 40 years during the Trudeau regimes. I would not club the whole of Canadian political leadership into the same bracket as the Trudeau Senior and Trudeau Junior. You had mentioned about Balwinda Parmar, and you mentioned about the others who have been given patronage, political patronage, and the agencies have actually helped them. And this happens to be an instrument of their foreign policy. And this is probably a Western project also, in my view. Very often, this is what one sees all through. So, I mean, they know that India has arrived, that India is a big country, that India represents the voice of the global South. It is the fifth largest economy, largest democracy. And today, whatever India says, the leadership speaks out, that is heard very carefully outside. So they did make a statement, and as you heard from Mr. Kuski, that there is a problem between intelligence and evidence, and that kind of a difference. So they even might have some kind of electronic intelligence or picking some conversation somewhere, then they cannot convert it into this evidence to present to the government of India. So that is their dilemma now.
But
And the
Ambassador
biggest
Trigunayat, is
dilemma,
it that easy for Canadians and Americans to spy on Indian officials? Is it that easy and that smooth?
well, the spying, as diplomats, we all know that the moment you leave your country, you are going to be spied upon, you are going to be tailed, you are going to be snooped upon. And so it is irrespective of the country you are there, depends on the country's capabilities. But most of the Western countries, most of the communist countries do have very elaborate mechanisms of espionage, and it is very difficult to counter that. But at the same time, we are trained to look after ourselves so that serious business is conducted as it is supposed to be conducted, irrespective of the kind of networks that are moving around you. So this is normal, actually. Every country tries to do it and does because see, very often what happens is that there are these kind of elements that they are supporting. And there is some of these countries in the West always follow the project of regime change, the project democracy. This is not something that you have a love for democracy, but it is a project democracy. So that's why they try to use all kinds of stunts and equipments and tools at their command to be able to do that. You have heard about the Israeli, what was the tool that they used, the Pegasus software. Like, so today this is so much technologically advanced systems are there. So sometimes but there are ways whereby you can avoid those. So I doubt very much that this is something that is very serious that they have. If they had it, they would have presented to Government of India. In any case, irrespective of whatever intelligence they have, the fact remains is that Nijjar was and his ilk are terrorists, are extremists, are secessionists, and they need to be dealt with like any terrorist. You cannot have my terrorist versus your terrorist. That kind of an approach is not going to work when there's supposed to be a global fight. So I wonder that just for simple political expediency, Mr. Trudeau has taken a very unwise step and indulged, in my view, in a diplomatic indiscretion.
Dean, we've a large factor of why Justin Trudeau is believed to be doing this is the fact that elections are approaching and he's at an all-time low when it comes to his numbers. He's not as popular as perhaps he was at one point. And that's why he's raked up this issue and, have had these leaked reports and leaked allegations, quote unquote. But back home, he also is facing domestic challenges like cost of living and, the housing prices going up. How are Canadians seeing this whole incident, number one? And number two, has this step really helped Justin Trudeau at all among his vote bank?
So I think, listen, I think that the jury is out as to whether or not this is helping Justin Trudeau change his fortunes with the Canadian population at this juncture in time. His government, which was a majority government, followed by two minority governments, propped up by the NDP and an NDP agreement to keep the minority government in place. It has been known that Jagmeet Singh, who is a Sikh himself, has certainly come out in support of the Khalistani separatist movement prior, or certainly has shown an affinity towards such a group. So whether or not this works for his political fortunes, it's believed by many that he wanted to change the channel, given that there's a potential national inquiry and probe into foreign election interference by the Chinese Communist Party inside Canada, which the new judge, and with cooperation of the other parties in Parliament, agreed to broaden that out to other countries. So it's clear that if I move the discussion to a potential murder on Canadian soil by a foreign government, that all of a sudden Canadian citizens might look at this and view that, hey, this is more serious than a little bit of election and foreign interference into our government. This is a murder. So I think there is some deflection here, but also I think there was a calculus played, given his poll numbers, that this could change the conversation. And it certainly did for a number of days. So we'll see whether or not this works in terms of people believing that he's stronger on the issues of foreign interference. But quite frankly, I think this move has backfired for obvious reasons, and he's not getting the support of Five Eyes allies to the extent that he expected to see that. Furthermore, there has been no real evidence or smoking gun presented, and in fact, the Americans may well have shared information that drew a conclusion, but we also know that this disinformation is open source and being propagated by Chinese Communist Party narratives. You can go to a number of sites and see that this dialogue came out months ago. So, there's much more to be concerned with overall, and whether or not this gambit will pay off for the Prime Minister is still in question.
All right, we'll have to see that. I'm going to have to wrap this up here. But of course, yes, quick 30 seconds, Jorjit, and then I'm going to wrap this discussion up.
Yeah, so, ma'am, the Canadian PM Justin Trudeau, in 2018, when he came to India, the declared Khalistani terrorist Jaspal Atwal was on his dinner list. From demonstrations to referendums, putting poster hoardings of Indian, officers, calling their assassination. Justin Trudeau has proven to be a very immature politician in terms of this issue. Without any evidence, he has stood in the parliament and he spoke against India. So I must say that his intentions are to be questioned, and that is the only reason that his popularity is declining day by day.
Okay. All right, Sardar Jojit Sabharwal, Dean Baxendale, and Anil Trigunayat, thank you very much, gentlemen, for speaking with Mirror Now and joining us tonight and sharing your perspective on this big contentious issue between India and Canada. Thank you very much.